Hey everyone. Excited to have Brendan Sheehan, owner, founder, Waymark Wealth Management, one of our community business sponsors. We are going to have a quick conversation, talk a little bit about kind of not the, what's going on politically in the financial market per se, but just kind of this whole idea around there's volatility, all this stuff going on. Brendan's kind of an expert in this area. He works with tons of clients, and is, I'll just say my financial advisor, and I trust him with everything. And I think he could give some good kind of like perspective. So I reached out to Brendan, said, hey, like there's this thing going on, obviously that with like all the market volatility. And typically when stuff like that happens, we can make kind of decisions without necessarily fully thinking it out. So I wanted to get Brendan on here and chat a little bit about that. But yeah, let's just get into it, Brendan. What's going on with like the markets, and what are you seeing, and how are people reacting, and what's your take on this as a human history piece?
Yeah. So I always say to my clients, I have two degrees back there. One's a financial planning degree and one's a psychology degree. And I think right now, the psychology degree is coming in a lot more handy than the financial planning degree. I think a lot of people are certainly nervous and upset about what's going on with the markets. But I do very much believe that there's a huge behavioral element that's coming into this, and it really does, again, and I said this to Mike before he started recording, that it's very much based on political leanings. If you do not like Trump, you're probably more upset about this than someone who does like Trump. And it's actually kind of paid off. I actually have a slide that can kind of show this. Can I start sharing, Mike, or no?
Jared, yeah.
Okay, let me see if I have it up here.
I don't know how
Uh,
many people are gonna watch this. They may just listen to it, but we'll try to talk through what the slide looks
okay.
like.
Long story short, I got this fancy slide here that pretty much says that depending on your political leanings, it definitely influences how you feel about the economy. And no big surprise, I don't think any of this is going to surprise anyone, is that when a Republican is in the presidency, Republicans think that the economy is doing really well or excellent. And they don't when a Democrat does, and vice versa. When a Democrat is in office, a Democrat thinks that the economy is doing really well, and vice versa when a Republican is. And so it's actually happening, and it's happening right now in real time, where I see it, day in and day out. My more liberal leaning clients are very upset, whereas my more conservative clients aren't as upset. We all know this thing here, which is that market pullbacks are common. The market does move 5 to 10% down pretty frequently, on average about 3 times a year. If we go one step further, 10 to 20%, which is where we are right now, that happens about once per year. So this happens, much more frequently. But again, I think the intensity with which people are feeling this is is really based on their political leanings,
Mhm.
and those that are, again, a little bit more on the liberal side are feeling this a lot more than others.
Mhm.
And I think we can all make the um, the jumps as to why that is. You typically talk to people who are like-minded. And so, liberal clients and more democratic clients are probably talking to other liberal people, and they're getting themselves worked up. They're getting themselves all amped up and saying, we've never seen this before. This is unprecedented. I've heard this so many times that we've never seen anything like this before. And I would challenge that. I got another slide on that one if you want me to show that slide. I know that you're saying that
Show,
this,
show all the slides. Slides are good.
you said it's okay for slides.
Slides are good, man. Let's pull them up. It's cool.
So this guy here, what this is pretty much showing is that over the last 30 years, and this goes all the way to 2022, there have been a lot of bad things that have happened, and all of them, you could argue, were unprecedented. Obviously, World Trade Center, whether it was the bombing of the World Trade Center or September 11th, or the 2008 real estate crisis or COVID or, inflation hitting almost double digits last year. Like all these things were unprecedented, but we figured out a way to get through them. Again, I think as we're right in the middle of all this, the important thing is what you should do right now. And I think this is where Mike and I kind of see some synergies between our business and your business, which is that you really have to control your emotions. And I think number one of the things that you need to do is kind of surround yourself with people who are not just continuing to pump negativity into your head. So I have one more slide, and then I'll turn it over to Mike. This is something that we see a lot of, is that this is kind of a roller coaster of how people make investment decisions. And when the market goes up, 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 people go through a whole host of different emotions, going from optimism to euphoria. Then the market starts coming down. They get anxious, they get desperate, they get panic, and then they just become despondent and depressed. And then eventually they start coming back up. And again, going back to the political spectrum piece, I would argue that most people who are a little bit more on the liberal side are in the despondency and depressed, whereas some of the more conservative ones might be in anxiety, denial, and fear, but not anywhere close to desperation, panic, and some of the more extreme feelings. And that's where I think that's where the gym really helps, is that getting into just a normal routine, getting away from the social media, getting away from the 24-hour news that's constantly pumping you full of stress is a good thing.
Yeah. No, I'm glad it was funny. So everyone that's listening or reading or however we decide to share this, I reached out to Brendan literally like a few hours ago, and I was just saying, hey, listen, like I see everything that's going on, and I just have my gut instinct is like, it's good to get this out and kind of talk about it, because, I don't think we're at the level that it could potentially the market could go down to by any means. And it could maybe get worse, maybe it gets better. You don't really know. Like what you're saying is like, yes, things will eventually trend back up. But
I'm not saying anything from my compliance department.
Your compliance department, yes, you won't say anything, but like the trends that you were kind of showing, there's some hope, but like there's this piece on kind of like wellness, fitness, whichever word you kind of want to use around that. I think one of the interesting things about Prototype, and you've been a member and part of Prototype since we opened in 2012. So you've seen the ups and the downs and everything in between, and have had probably more conversations on the financial side around these things, but also have this perspective of like why health and exercise is just so important just from the mental perspective. And so kind of as I reached out to Brendan, one of the things I was talking about is like this, we talk about it a lot from like the mental fitness side of things, like, emotions drive decisions, drive our behavior. And so whether we're in a really good mood or whether we're in a bad mood, that can dictate what we do. And sometimes we don't have even awareness of that. I think what you kind of pointed out with social media and all this other sort of stuff and who you're talking to and whatever that is, like that can bring you up, bring you down. And as a result, that can kind of bleed you into this spinning sort of situation. The other thing I want to talk about is this acronym VUCA, which I learned from some of the work I've done with like NextJump, but then they've got it from the military, which stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I think we're living in a world that has high VUCA everywhere, not just now, I just think in general, as things are just more challenging, from an uncertainty standpoint, things are just moving faster. And so I just think we're in kind of a certain emotional state. There's a lot of VUCA. We tend to do things that we may like regret. And then that makes me think about, well, when I look at like what we do from a fitness perspective, exercise and our health, I wouldn't say personally for myself, this is like what I do, but like even clients that we work with just over time, like, and this is a human behavioral thing. Like the first thing you tend to drop is like your own health, right? From a behavioral perspective. So however much money that you're spending and dedicating to your health, that may be the area that you cut first. And I think it's almost the exact opposite thing that you should be doing. And I'm just not just saying that because I'm in the coaching and health business. I'm saying that from just a straight up scientific perspective. Like it's the health and mental benefits that you get from exercise, being around people in person, community is almost its own antidote and medicine, I'd say, for some of the challenges that we can go through from the mental side of things. And there's a huge connection between the mind and body. The research is like robust on that. And so I guess what my piece in this is, if you're feeling kind of that, whatever, those feelings that Brendan was kind of talking about, and things aren't going really well, instead of making this kind of emotional decision of like, oh, I got to stop exercising, I got to put this on hold, or I got to stop, or I got to cancel, or do whatever. And then you can often narrate up, well, I'll just continue to do that. Chances are like that may not happen. It tends to be a regretful like decision. So is there a way to kind of like take a step back, get into that fight, flight, or freeze sort of like mindset? And I think that's what comes out as a result of that. And so,
No, I really like what you said. Like even outside of that, Brendan, is like the routine. You don't want to like completely change your routine based off of that. And if like you have a routine of going into the gym, or it could be anything, like that's where like the anxiety will start to creep in if you start to, change your routine around, dive more into the social media and like the doomsday, all that, all those things. So I really like how you said, stay in your normal routine.
Sheehan, just real quick, I'm gonna
Yeah.
call you Sheehan, not Brennan. Um, what like just like from your experience, what are some of like the reactions that people tend to have when these situations sort of come up? Like what do you see people doing? I'm sure you said you started this whole thing off with like you're leaning into your psychology degree. Like what are the things you got to talk people off the ledge? I don't know if that's the best acronym, but yeah, talk them off the ledge about.
Yeah, it's interesting because, there's an old saying in our business that the human brain doesn't know the difference between a bear and a bear market.
Hmm.
So bear market, if you don't know what that is, that's when the market drops 20%. And your brain literally has the same reaction to running away from a bear as it does when you lose 20% of your investment portfolio. You have that same, just like you were saying earlier, Mike, fight or flight, where, you want to just get out of there. It's kind of like getting in the cold plunge. You just want to get the hell out of there as quickly as you can. And everything, every muscle fiber in you says, do something.
Mhm.
So, that's I think what is dangerous when it comes to investing, because what I always tell people is if you decide to take that really dramatic step where you're invested and you say, I can't take this anymore, I'm going to move it all to cash. Okay, great. And you might be right temporarily, but you have to be right twice when you do that. You have to be right, get out of the market here. If the market keeps going down, high five, you did the right thing. But when are you going to get back?
Yeah.
And what happens with a lot of people is the headlines are still going to be bad down here. This is when the perfect time to get in, but the headlines are going to be terrible, 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 terrible. Then the market's going to start creeping back, and you're going to say, well, when it feels a little bit better, feels a little bit better. And then by the time you get back in, you're buying in higher than when you sold, and you're doing what everyone isn't supposed to do, which is sell low and buying high. And that's the danger of letting, some of your more caveman type responses and the caveman part of your brain take over and kind of hijack the more rational side of your brain. So, just going back to what you were saying, Mike, a moment ago, what do I do? A lot of active listening, a lot of just like listening to people and hear what they're concerned with, because I think a lot of people just need to say it out loud to someone. And, then you say, can I give you a different opinion of what that might look like?
I, I just started to think about this synonymous, whatever, analogy from what you were just talking about. I've heard this. I mean, we've had the gym since, like I said, 2012, been in the industry for going on 16, 17 years, working with people from like one-on-one perspective to the group model, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like this analogy of like, you're exercising, you're healthy, you stop, right? So stop investing in yourself. And then health declines. And then we start to narrate, okay, I need to get back into it, but wait, I need to wait till I get into better shape before then I start again. And then now 6 months, 12 months, 18 months go by, then something happens where then you make the decision, you start exercising, it's obviously a lot harder. Then regret comes in. Oh God, or shame. Oh God, I wish I didn't do that. Where would I be if I continued doing this?
Or this used to be so much easier.
Or it used to be so much easier. I need to get, or then it's like, oh my God, this is so much harder. And then even sticking with that back into the routine once you get out of it is even, I'd argue, sometimes even harder than when, just kind of going through kind of that. And it reminds me of like this idea around like fear. We can make these decisions to do things like from a fear perspective. I found like when, we've had these conversations, like from like a financial perspective, when I'm like scared about something, I reach out to you to get more information. I'm like, Brendan, like, can you like, versus like, let me just pull my money out, right? Like there's a level of curiosity, but also my first action is like, let me know a little bit, let me know a little bit more. And that could even be from this, just even to give it like an example. And I also want to say, I'm not trying to downgrade, because some people may be like really struggling from like a financial perspective. And like, it's not cheap to like, for some places to exercise. You can go and exercise by yourself totally for free. But there's also this part of like accountability and community and all this other sort of stuff. And I can see how even being curious of like, all right, well, I'm spending X amount of dollars on fitness. What could be another option that I can continue to do this and maybe downgrade, or say maybe continue to do this, but not do it as much, if that really is something that you absolutely need to do? Is there other options that I can explore versus the very binary decision, stop? It's very, it's binary. And so I always think when fear sets in, anxiety sets in, try to get more information versus make a brash.
That's a good the question I was gonna ask you, Brendan, is like, I don't want to get into like too much detail in here, but is there anything that you kind of would advise to help people when they're feeling like that, like certain strategies they could do to kind of even look at where they're at and what decisions they should make? But you don't have to get into like all the details, but just like high level kind of thinking, what you would tell someone to help them if they're getting into that like flight type of mindset.
I think again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about the brain. Like literally, the rational part of your brain shuts down. So you can't just start throwing charts and graphs and this is what the market history looks like and all of that. Like logic won't work when you're in a panic situation. So again, you have to kind of listen to what they have to say and just let them get it out because they need to brain dump on you. But then, just start nudging them and start saying, well, can I give you a different perspective on that? Or, again, and I think you gotta, I don't know if Mike wants to get into the political part, but I think that it is the elephant in the room here. That my more liberal clients are more upset by this. And so I do kind of pivot my language to be something that they'll actually resonate with, and I say, and I'll get a little bit, I'll throw our buddy President Trump under the bus a little bit and say, you appreciate the fact that, he's got, he wants to save face and he realizes what that his approval rating is going down. Do you think that he's going to let it get to a level where the market is down 50% and he's not going to do something about that? And then they're like, you know what, that totally makes sense. And that kind of correlates with their worldview. And then they start kind of getting out of the panic mode and a little bit more into the logic mode. So I think you have to, again, going back to what, if you're really asking me to show you how the sausage is made, that's a little bit of what I do, is that, I kind of tailor my comments to be a little bit of a chameleon with where the client's head is at and try to meet them there.
It's interesting too, because not everyone's going to tell the flat out truth, right? Where it's say, oh, I want to do this because of this reason, and you might have to probe a little bit to get more of the details, because there is like, can be like a fuzziness to it. Maybe people don't want to really expose like the true fear, like in like the panic. Maybe they tend to be more level-headed and they don't want to show like that emotional side. So you got to kind of get some more details to let them kind of give you more of the truth. That's the best way to be able to help someone, if you know really what's going on between the in the ears. And if you don't, then it's hard. You can give general advice, right? But it's like, it's hard to really kind of nail it down. But it just goes back to this whole idea, like we tend to stop doing the thing that's the best thing for us in situations where we need it the most.
And again, I think everyone knows that, and this goes back to the whole like emotion piece. And I think everyone knows logically that you should, everything that we've talked about, you should keep a level head, keep your routine going, shut off the negativity, get away from the doom scrolling, let someone else do the doom scrolling for you. But yet it's intoxicating when you start getting into it and you start going down the rabbit hole. And then again, if you have friends who are like-minded and they're all kind of pumping at you as well, it's going to escalate your panic, and you have to break that cycle. You have to get back to what used to make you happy and get out of that.
Probably. You pair community and being around good people, you add in an element of doing stuff that's difficult and gets you outside of your comfort zone. And then you add in all the strength training and cardiovascular benefits that exercise comes with. And you got pretty potent medicine that I think if you could put that into a pill form, everyone would take that, if it was that just that easy to do.
Much more tactically. One of the things that I've said to you before, I've said to a lot of people at the gym that I love about the gym is that for the 1 hour that you're there, you're focused on one thing. And the outside world kind of disappears. So whether you're having trouble at work, whether the markets are really getting you down, whether there's, stress with your family, while you're at the gym, you have to stretch, lift heavy weights, and do a WOD. And it's almost therapeutic to just be focused on one thing for 1 hour. So again, 120%, I agree with you that like you got to keep going to the gym because the gym is good medicine for all the negativity that's out there in the world right now.
150%, 200%, 1,000%.
I would say 210.
210%. I know we were going to keep this short and sweet. I think we covered a bunch of stuff in our time, Brendan. But yeah, I really appreciate you jumping on. I know you're a busy guy and you got a bunch of people to help. But yeah, again, appreciate your time and kind of talking through this. We'll share this out, and if anyone that's listening that wants more information or wants to talk to someone that's an expert in this field around kind of like financial services, Brendan's your guy. Waymark Wealth Management. We have all his contact information. We'll put that in the however we share this based on Brendan's compliance, giving a thumbs up or thumbs down. He'll be able to. We'll put a little shout out in there if you ever want to reach out to Brendan. He's the best.
All right, thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Brendan.
All right.